Hey guys, welcome back for another video. My garden is totally blooming outside and I was inspired to paint a flower for you. So I walked around and found one of the prettiest ones I could in my garden, and that is a zinnia. So that's what we're gonna paint today. Okay, so to get started, I went in my garden and I picked a zinnia. They're coming up in all different colors, but I chose this kind of salmon pink color. I've got my Arches watercolor paper, I've got my Winsor watercolors, and I have my Grumbacher paintbrushes, and I'm gonna be using a size 10 and 3 today. Okay, so to get started, I'm going to be doing a couple different views of this flower. So I'll do like a top view down, and then I'll do like a side view just to kind of show you a couple different ways of doing this flower. Okay, so I've got my number 2 pencil. You don't have to start with sketching, but I thought it'd be easier just to show you how I'm starting out just by sketching it. So I'm going to be starting with the middle of the flower, and it's not going to be like a perfect line. It's just gonna be very, very sketchy, just to kind of give you an idea of what I'm doing. And then I'm gonna be doing my little petals out because it's got all these petals. It's got all these petals that are just coming out like from the center out, but they're like round. They're not sharp little petals. They're round little petals, kind of like teardrops. And they're all clustered together. So you're gonna wanna leave a little bit of space between them. So see how I left some space between them? So now the petals behind them are kind of coming in and making it look like they're all touching. So you're just gonna go around your flower and you're gonna make these little teardrops. Okay. So I'm gonna pick up my number 10, and I think I'm gonna be using, if you're following along with me and you wanna use the paints that I'm using, like I said, these are the Winsor and I'm gonna be using the Perm Rose right now. But if you don't have these paints, don't worry, just grab a pink. You can make your zinnias any color. I've got red out there, I've got yellow out there. I just decided to pick this pink one here. Actually, let me put, oh, and one other thing I wanted to show you. I had pulled a painting I had done about a year ago, and this is of a zinnia, but it's a close-up of a zinnia. So see how detailed I get in there with my petals and my shading and stuff. So if you want to learn, I will do another video on a close-up of a flower like this. It's a little bit more of an abstract. The closer you get into something, the more abstract it looks, which I personally love. That's kind of my style. And then you can get really, really detailed with your darks and your lights and all like the little like seed looking things in the middle here. So you can get really, really detailed. But we're not going to be doing that today. I'll do that in another video. But I just wanted to show you that's another look you can achieve. But what I'm going to be doing is more of a far away view. So I'm going to pick up my Perm Rose, and I'm just going to do kind of like little C curves, and I'm going to leave a little bit of white space, and I'm not worried about staying in my lines. Those were just to guide me about like around like the roundness of my petals, but I'm not going to exactly do each of those petals. That was, like I said, that was just to guide me. So do little C curves and leave a little bit of white space in there and go all around your flower. Okay, so once that layer has dried, you can go on, and I'm gonna move now to my number 3 brush. And you could put another little layer of them and start looking to see like where your shadows are. So there's like shadows around the petals, like in more towards the center and stuff. So just keep an eye on how your flower looks and where the shadows and the highlights are. So I'm gonna be putting in a little bit. I'm still using my Perm Rose. So I want to leave some of that original first layer showing. I want to leave some of my white paper showing. So I'm not going over the whole thing. I'm just giving it some shadows here and there. So we're gonna let that dry, and then we're gonna go on to our center. So our center here has the orange, and then it's got these little yellow clusters in there, and then it's got more of like a dark orange cluster also. So just kind of observe your flower and see what the middle of it looks like. I'm gonna pull in some Scarlet Lake into my perm rose. So I made kind of this orange mixture here. And I'm gonna come in and just do the center of my flower, making some lines here, just kind of going outward, kind of like a sunburst. And then I'm gonna put in some more dotted orange around the edge. And it's okay if it bleeds into your petals like that. And if you don't want it to bleed into your petals, just dry your flower first or wait for it to dry, and then you can go on to this step. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and dry this so we can go on to the next layer. Okay, so my first and my second layer are now dry. So I'm gonna go in and just kind of punch my colors out a little bit more. I'm just gonna kind of go over what I just did and just give it another layer. And then we can start bringing in some shadows also. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a little bit of my Payne's Gray, water it down, because you don't want a gray flower. You're just trying to make some shadows. So I'm gonna go in, I don't know if you can see this, but there's like shadows around my petals. Each petal is making a shadow onto the petal behind it. So you're gonna wanna kind of follow along with that. So I'm just gonna come in and I'm gonna go around some of my petals. It'll kind of look like I'm outlining them, but I'm not. I'm just trying to add a little bit of shadow behind them. And then you can start adding a little bit of shadows more towards the center of your flower as well, because the center of your flower is a little bit deeper. So now what we can do is we can start adding in our yellow. It's got a little bit of these like orangey yellows, bright yellows, golden yellows, all in the center here. It's kind of like little petals that are trying to open up that haven't opened up yet. And then there's also like these little yellow, I don't know what you call them, pistons maybe, that are coming out here. So I'm gonna use a deeper yellow, which I believe this one here is lemon, Winsor lemon. And I'm just gonna dab it in the center. And it's okay if your center's still wet, it'll just bleed into each other a little bit. All right, then I'm gonna take a little of burnt umber and I'm gonna deepen up my, I'm gonna mix it with maybe like a Scarlet Lake here. And I'm gonna deepen up my middle a little bit. Now what you could do is you can add a little bit more of your perm rose. And you can start from your center out. And this time they're not really the C curves. I'm just kind of dabbing it just where like the petals are curved and the middle of the petal is darker, whereas the outside of the petals are lighter. So I'm really trying to just do like the middle of the petal right now. And like I said before, the further away your flower, the less detail you're gonna have. So right now it's just kind of like dabbing little lines. If we were actually doing a close up, which is more of an abstract, you would start blending in your colors all beautifully together like this. But that's a lot more detail. That's a close up of your flower. This is not a close up of your flower. Okay, so once your flower is nice and dry, you can go in with a white eraser and you can start erasing some of your pencil marks. The ones that are more on the inside of your flower, you're not going to be able to see because you do have a lot more layers towards the middle of your flower. But the petals on the outside, you could just go in and lightly erase. Now, I would never use a pink eraser just in case it leaves a mark, but use a white, nice, clean eraser and just lightly go around it. Another thing that I've said in many videos is don't use your hands to wipe away the eraser marks because you have oils on your hands and it will leave oils on your paper. Always take a clean, dry brush and get rid of those eraser marks. Okay, so now my pencil marks are gone and it looks like a cute little zinnia. I am going to start deepening in my middle here a little bit more. So I'm going to pull in the same colors I was already using, the burnt umber and the perm rose and a little bit of the scarlet lake. I'm just going to do a mixture of all sorts. And I'm just going to be coming in and deepening up some of these middle tones a little bit. And you can make this as dark as you want. I know my flower is not that dark of the burnt umber. So if you want, you can leave it like this. It gives it a little bit more of a punch to your painting. But if you don't, just dab it off a little bit. And then you can keep layering it. And I am going to do a little bit more of the Scarlet Lake and the my lemon yellow mixed together. So it's a little bit more of an orange tone here in the middle. And I'm going to bring in a little bit more of my lemon yellow, just to give a little bit of a highlight here and there. All right, so now at this point, if you want to start adding a little bit more of a crispness to your petals, you can. So I'm just going to pick up my perm rose, and I'm going to just start going around some of my petals a little bit. You don't want to go around your whole flower because then it's just going to look like you outlined your flower. So just kind of go around parts of it. And what I'm doing is I'm picking more towards the bottom of the flower, just so it looks like the light is coming from the top of the flower down, and I've got a little bit more of shadows on the bottom of my flower. All right, so we're gonna leave that flower alone for a little bit, and we're gonna go on to a side view. So let me take this out of the water here. Okay, so side view of my flower, I don't know if you see this, but it's got all these, it almost looks like an artichoke, the way the leaves come up, the way the stem comes up and branches into the petals here. It's beautiful. It's got kind of like a yellow, a green. It's got almost like an outline of this burnt umber color, and then it leads into the petals. So we're going to be kind of doing that look there. Okay. So I'm going to come in with my pencil, and I'm just going to kind of make this like cup mark. And it's got all these like little artichoke looking scales. I guess that's what you would call it. They're like little scales. And then the flower would start branching off. And it's got the petals. And some petals you will see coming towards you. They just look like little curves, little C curves. And then as it goes out towards the edge of the flower, it's a little bit more of a line, a straighter line, still with the curve at the end. And then it just kind of comes up. You just see little curves. And then it's got a nice, zinnias have a nice thick stem because it's got a really big flower on it. It needs a nice thick stem to hold that up. Okay. And then that's about all I'm going to draw at this point. And then the rest we can just do with paint. All right, so I'm going to use the same technique I just did with this one. So I'm picking up my bigger brush again, my number 10, Perm Rose. I'm just gonna do the same color flower, leave it nice and simple. And I'm gonna come around and I'm gonna just kind of mimic my shapes of the petals. And like this one, don't worry about doing every individual petal. The only reason we drew it was to kind of give us an idea of the placement of it, the shape of it, but we do not have to sit here and trace and go around every single petal we just did. That was not the point of drawing it. It was to just kind of give your eye and your mind an idea of where the flower is gonna be. Okay, so there is your side view. So we're gonna let that dry. Okay, so our first layer of Perm Rose is dry. And we're gonna go on and make another layer of it, of the same color. And we're just gonna deepen in some of our tones here. Still kind of using that C curve. So like I said, these petals here are coming out at you, whereas these on the sides, they're a little bit more elongated. It's just the way you're looking at the flower, it's perspective. And I want to still leave some of that nice scaly look there of the stem, because that's just gorgeous. So don't cover all that up. All right, and then the middle of my flower has that orangish yellow again, and you don't see as much of it because it's a side view, but you do see some of it more towards the top. So I'm going to bring in a little bit of that orangey yellow color again. All right, I'm gonna let that dry and I'm gonna go on to my stem. So my stem, I think I'm just using, I have a mixture already here on my palette. I'm not even sure what it is. It's probably lemon yellow with a a sap green. So I'm just gonna come in and I am going to actually do my stem, and I'm gonna bring it up into some of those scales. And you can leave a little white space in your scales if you want to, or you could do a complete wash over the whole thing. I'm choosing to do it this way, but you could just do a whole wash of this mixture. And then bring your stem down. And I'm gonna bring in a little bit of my lemon yellow, because it does have a little bit of a lemon yellow more towards the bottom of those scales. So see how I still have a little bit of white space? So I'm not following along with my scales completely. It was just to give me the idea. Just like how we drew out the petals here, it's just to give you the idea of where it is. You do not have to follow them exactly. All right, and then I'm gonna take a little bit of my burnt umber. The scales have a little bit of this outline on them. So I'm gonna do a little bit of that kind of outline with the burnt umber. And my paint is still wet, so it's definitely gonna bleed at this point, which is okay. And if you do not want it to bleed, then go ahead and dry this part of your painting. I'm gonna bring that down just a little bit, give it some shadow. Now, if that's too much, too dark for you, just blot it off a little bit, soften it up. You can bring in a little bit more of your green. Now, if this was a bigger close-up painting, we would be getting really detailed with these scales. But since it's a further away shot of your flower, you're not going to see it as detailed as if you were doing it up close. Now, where the petals meet the this little cup part, it is shadowed in there. So you can take a little bit of your burnt umber and you can start bringing it up a little bit and just shadowing your flower a little bit. I'm going to deepen up some of that orangey color up here. And then I'm going to start deepening in my perm rose. And you can bleed the perm rose with the yellow together. I'm gonna let this dry really quick and then I'm gonna give it another layer. Okay, so at this point, we can start adding some of our Payne's Gray to kind of give it a shadow around some of the petals like we did on this one. Now this one's gonna be a little bit different because it is a side view. So you're just gonna come in and around some of your petals. You're gonna dab in a little bit of Payne's Gray, and I'm kind of still going in those little C curves more towards the middle here. And then I'm going to bring in a little Payne's Gray in my, my stem as well. I'm going to bring in a few more little petals more towards the top here, just so it doesn't look so clustered. And right at the top, they're a little bit more of that orange color. All right, so we're gonna let that dry, and I am gonna go and do another flower, and this is gonna be kind of a in-between of these two, kind of like if you were looking at it sideways, but not completely sideways like this one. So I'm gonna start with my pencil again, just to give me an idea of placement, and I'll do this one down here. So since this one was nice and round, as you're turning the flower, the round part of your flower, let me take my flower out. As you're turning your flower, if you're looking at it like this, straight down, it's really round. But as you turn it, that turns into an elliptical, a nice oval. As you're turning it, that elliptical gets tighter, tighter, tighter. So I'm going to have it be a little bit of an oval this way. So that's the middle of my flower. And then I'm going to turn my paper sideways. And then what you're going to do is the petals on the top of the flower are going to be foreshortened. You're not going to see them as much, but the ones on the bottom here are going to be a little bit longer because that's what you really, really see. So again, just a quick placement of your petals just to give you an idea of how your flower is going to look. So see how these petals are a little bit darker or longer, and these are a little bit shorter. I think maybe that's about as big. So see how you don't see as many petals on that side? It's because your flower is turned. And we'll have another stem coming down this way. And on this one, since the petals are bigger on this side, you're not going to see that cup part where it holds all the petals. You're just going to go from flower to stem. You're not going to have this middle part here. And I guess I should be making a stem on this guy too, because he's just floating on my paper. All right. So again, I'm going to start with my larger brush with the perm rose. I'm just keeping all these flowers simple. I'm just going to be doing perm rose. You can make all different color zinnias. And I'm just kind of doing a little bit of that C curve again, not really following along with my petals. I'm being very loose about it. Go around that middle, leaving some white space. All right, so I'm going to be picking up my smaller brush again. So I'm really only using that bigger brush just for the initial first layer. And then the rest is pretty much with my smaller brush. So I'm just deepening up some of my areas, not all, but some. And then we're gonna go ahead and make that orange mixture again. And it could start bleeding in with your petals because some of your petals are nice and wet. Just dab it on. You want a little white space still showing through in there. And then some of your petals in the middle are a little bit more yellow, orangey, like more of a salmon-y color. All right, gonna let that dry. We'll just go onto our stem. I'm just gonna use the same green. And then I'm going to add a little bit of Payne's Gray to my stem also, like right under the petals where there's a little bit more of a shadow. I'll just let that bleed out a little bit. And then this one here, I'll just do a little bit of Payne's Gray up here. So we're gonna go on, and actually at this point, since the flower is dry, I'm gonna go ahead and erase some of my little pencil marks. Go around your stem since it's nice and wet still. And then I'm just gonna deepen up some of those colors again. I'm going to deepen up my center here a little bit because you see the center is kind of like this one where you see it a little bit more. So I'm going to deepen that up. All right, and I think I'm gonna do a little bit more of a punch in this flower here. I just wanna deepen up some of those tones. You don't have to. If you like your paintings a little bit more delicate and a little bit more loose, you could just leave it like that. Me, I like things a little bit more of a punch. I love contrast of lights and darks. So even though my flower is not this dark in the middle, I just like that look. So, you know, you have free reign of doing your painting however you want. You do not have to copy the flower exactly. Okay, so I'm gonna let that dry and I'm gonna go on to some leaves. So, let me dry this off. So the leaves on a zinnia are nice and big, and they've got these like reddish little veins in here. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take my number 10 again, and I'm just gonna go in the green mixture I already had and get that as light as you want. And I'm just gonna, I'll put a petal on this stem right here. So it kind of comes out a little bit rounder, and then it goes to a point, and they're nice and big. And depending on which way you're looking at the petal, I'll do this one as a side view. So I'll just come in like that. So this is the inside of my petal and this is the outside of my petal. And then you can add a little burnt umber if you want. Maybe a little too much, but that's okay. Just kind of bleed it out a little bit. Inside is a little bit darker and the outside's a little bit lighter. So I will come in with my green. And I will darken up the inside of my leaf. And you can leave a little highlight in there if you want to. So the inside of my leaf is a little bit darker. Just depends on which way the light is hitting it. So you have to look at, you know, your own petal and see where it's lighter, where it's darker. I'm gonna let that dry and I'm gonna go on to another one. Let's do one down. Well, actually it normally has one on either side. So we'll just do one kind of hiding behind this flower. And again, I'm going to make it so it looks like it's in. I'm just gonna go around my flower here. And I'll make it a little darker on the inside again. Blend that out. Okay, and I will do a petal coming off this stem, or a leaf I should say. Okay, so I'm gonna start doing some of that red veining in my leaves. So I'm just gonna take a red here. And the veining, you see it on the outside of the leaf, but it's not red. It's only really a little bit more red towards the stem here. So it's not red all the way out. So I will just bring it from the inside of the stem. So it's like you only see it on the inside of the stem. Because remember, this is the outside of the stem. And you don't really see it going all the way to the ends. It's more just in the middle where the leaf meets the stem. It's a little bit more red in there. And even the stem has a little bit of that redness on it, right where the leaves are. But remember, just look at your painting, because obviously, or your flower, because obviously your flower is going to be different than mine. So just kind of mimic what you see. And a little bit more red as we meet the stem. There, that's pretty. Okay, I'm gonna add a little bit more detail, let's see, to the outside here. And they're not dark, dark. They're just kind of a mid-tone. So I just want to kind of give it a little bit of veining, not a lot. Okay. And I'm going around and I'm just kind of giving it a little bit of an outline of a petal with more of my orange, just to kind of define those petals again, because it seems like they've gotten lost a little bit in the middle there. And I don't want that. I mean, I could play around with my painting all day. That's just what kind of painter I am. But I just like to go in and deepen things up. So as soon as I got like my base coat done, I just go in and I start deepening things up a little bit. But you don't have to. If you've got a lighter hand than me, then that's just the way you paint. Don't worry about it. Okay, I'm gonna define some of these leaves out here. So, and it's good always to have a light side and a dark side. So if you can go ahead and just darken up one of your sides, then it just kind of shows you where like the light is coming from. And another rule of thumb is always have your light come from the same side on all your flowers or whatever you're painting. Make sure your light is always coming from the same side. Unless you have two light sources, then that's a whole different story. But if you have one light source, like the sun or a lamp or the moon, always have your light source coming from one side. So right now, my light source is coming from the right because my left side is gonna be a little bit more shadowed. And this is the part that you can start doing that. So I'm coming in with a little bit of my Perm Rose, just some C curves on one side, and then I'm just gonna kind of blend them out so they don't look too much like an outline. And it's really important to keep in mind where your light source is coming from, because that can make or break a painting. Okay, so just to define my flower a little bit more, the petals a little bit more, I came in with some more Perm Rose and just a darker, it's almost just got a little bit of water mixed in with it, so it's nice and dark. And I'm just defining my petals mostly on the left side, the shadowed side, and then I added a little bit on the right side. So I can keep playing around with this painting all day and just keep changing it and changing it and adding more and adding more. As you can see, going back to this painting, look how dark I got. So I played around with this for hours. So you can go ahead and keep playing with your painting if you want to. Otherwise, you can stop at this point. There's really no right or no wrong. You could get as detailed as you want. So there's my painting. So this is 3 different views of the zinnia. Thanks so much for watching another video. I hope you liked it and learned a little something. And if you did, please give me a thumbs up. And you can also subscribe to this channel for more videos like this one. And you can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Have a great day. Bye.